Hey you guys, just a quick update on the situation at the FOXCONN iPhone factory in Zhengzhou, Henan province, China. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borum. Let's get reporting. Now, you guys will have heard about the riots or protests, however you want to put it, at the FOXCONN factory in Zhengzhou, the capital city of Henan province in central China. Now, there is some confusion, obviously, with no thanks to foreign media, about what is going on there. A lot of media initially put it down to COVID restrictions. That is not the case, although it is related in some way. You guys might remember about a few weeks ago, there was a bit of an uproar at the FOXCONN factory and some workers left. That is because of the COVID situation, largely. Many of them didn't want to be locked down inside the factory and were worried that they may not be able to leave freely. So some of them chose to leave, which has led to the current situation in that FOXCONN had to advertise for new employees to come. And it appears that a couple of situations surrounding these new employees' arrival has led to a bit of an uproar. Now, if you haven't already, you can check out the video I did a few weeks ago on my YouTube channel about the original FOXCONN situation. But basically, the situation now, like I said, relates to some payment issues regarding new employees, as well as some allegations that new employees were put in with existing employees who were worried that they may bring COVID into the situation. Now, I want to show you guys quickly this thread on Twitter, which I thought was pretty good, by Zhao Dashui, who basically spells out what is going on very clearly without any Western media spin, obviously. He says here, quite rightly, let's set the record straight. The protest is not about pandemic control policy, so it's one of the contributing factors. The main problem here is FOXCONN is accused of changing their temporary employment contracts and not honouring their advertised pay, which is completely true. I have an advertisement here that FOXCONN put out earlier looking for new staff, promising a lot of, here we go, retention, bonuses, and so on. Clearly, mentioning amounts here for certain sectors of the factory and the dates. And allegedly what has happened is some workers have said that once they received their contracts, the contracts stated different amounts and different dates, which led to a bit of an uprising, well, what you saw in the videos all across Western media and social media, which isn't a good look. Now, obviously, the police or riot police had to be called in because order must be maintained. So, of course, when you have thousands of employees who are angry, wanting to lash out, and then police coming to restore order, there is going to be some disagreements, I guess you could say. Here we have Sky News blowing it up, though. Protesters attacked by police at FOXCONN Apple iPhone factory in China. That's not the case. I mean, the police need to use force to get things under control, but I don't think it's fair to say that police attacked anybody or went out of their way to attack anybody. Although, of course, police forces everywhere in the world have rogue officers who go a bit over the top. So I'm not ruling it out, but I'm just saying that that is not something that the police would go for as a whole to attack people. They just want to restore order, which is understandable. Now, another thing that hasn't been mentioned, and it is mentioned in this Twitter thread, is that FOXCONN is a Taiwanese company. Now, I think that's quite important. Now, Zhao Dashui says, I look at FOXCONN, an exploitative Taiwanese company, as a carton of milk. It will provide nourishment for your city when you need that low-end manufacturing employment, but please throw it in the bin once you moved up the economic ladder. FOXCONN provides little benefit to your economy once all of your provinces have moved up the economic ladder. If you trace the map of FOXCONN moving their manufacturing hub, you'll find the majority of its operations have shifted from southern China around Shenzhen to Zhengzhou. Now, that is key here. Now, you guys might remember the suicide net story from FOXCONN about 10 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, in 2010. Quite a number of employees jumped from the building and committed suicide, unfortunately, and that was put down to terrible working conditions and among other things. Now, the factory basically didn't say anything. They decided in the beginning on a no comment policy, which didn't help. A bunch of mainland universities worked together to create a report about the work situations there, and they found that one of the factors could have been discrimination from Taiwanese workers towards mainland Chinese workers. So that is something to keep in mind, and that certainly does exist, discrimination from some Hong Kong people, from some Taiwanese people who oftentimes will look down on mainland Chinese, which obviously isn't nice. And that can lead to a hideous working situation, especially if you're living in the factory, which they do all the time, even without COVID. These workers live in the campus on site. Now, Zhao Dashuai mentions why the factory moved from Shenzhen to Henan province. So basically 10 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, Shenzhen was a lot poorer than it is today. Now that it has climbed up the economic ladder, the Taiwanese company FOXCONN can no longer afford to pay the workers the amount of money they are demanding for the work. So they've moved to Henan province, which he calls a uniquely poor province. Now, why is that? He puts it down to the fact that Henan and Zhengzhou in particular are inland cities that are landlocked with no access to water-based transportation. Now, of course, water-based transportation, as he mentions here, is the cheapest. Now, that is why a lot of the manufacturing bases in China will be found along the east coast here, because they can send out their goods overseas or wherever very cheaply by sea. But also a lot of the inland cities you can see here do have access by river all year round. So you can go downstream to Shanghai, for example. But Henan province does not have access to that kind of system for large ships, as pointed out in this Twitter thread. Zhao Dashuai mentions that he thinks that Henan, Zhengzhou, will be the last spot where Foxconn will have a factory in mainland China, and then they'll move to other areas, maybe Vietnam, also maybe India, to take advantage of even cheaper labor. Now, somebody questioned me on Twitter yesterday when I mentioned that Foxconn is a Taiwanese company. They said, isn't there one China? Why is it okay for you to separate them now when it suits your narrative? Now, as we all know, Taiwan is currently administered on a day-by-day basis by another government, and that is likely to be the situation even after reunification. China will be looking for the one country, two systems policy, as you see in Hong Kong, as you see in Macau, for Taiwan as well. So it is very relevant to mention that Foxconn is a Taiwanese company. Since it's being run by a different government, Taiwan, you may see some different work practices, some exploitation going on that you may not see from companies who are headquartered here in mainland China. So very relevant. Now, on the 23rd, Foxconn released a statement here where they said that new employees arriving in the factory will not be put in with existing employees. They'll be given a separate area, and that area will have been sanitized. Yeah, it looks like they're saying that that part of the claim from disgruntled employees isn't true. They also doubled down a few days ago and said that there was also no payment issue and that they had actually paid as promised, which they doubled back on yesterday when they released this apology for the situation that's going on there, which they will need to do because it is really not a good look. And I can imagine that local governments in Zhengzhou are not happy at all, not to mention Beijing with what's going on there, because you can't forget that the CPC is fundamentally a workers' party. So they really care about the well-being of these workers and they want them to be treated fairly, remunerated fairly. So I can tell you now that this company will be feeling a lot of pressure from local and central governments over this situation. So they released this 3-point apology, basically talking about the situation. Now, I'll bring it up on screen now for you in English. Basically, the first one mentions that caring for employees' health and safety is the primary operating principle that the group, Foxconn, has always adhered to. And we fully understand the concerns of some new employees in Zhengzhou Park about possible changes in the subsidy policy. And they say here that after an internal investigation, they found that the problem was caused by a computer error, which I don't really buy for a second, but if they want to save face and rectify the problem and claim that it was a computer error, then so be it. But sort out the situation, treat your staff better, give them the pay you promised. The second point just mentions that they're continuing to actively communicate with employees affected by the wrongful information, which is, again, a cop-out in my opinion. And they say all employees' salaries and bonuses are issued in accordance with the company policy. they say the company will do their best to address employee concerns. And the third point just basically talks about that the company Foxconn will support any employees that wish to leave, so they will help them to do so. And the last part says they will also continue to support anyone who chooses to stay. So basically, an about face there in the end, as Foxconn apologized yesterday. I think basically this whole situation comes down to Foxconn's terrible treatment, probably you could say terrible treatment of staff. I mean, who's going to promise a certain amount and then go back on that? And also, we saw the situation more than 10 years ago in Shenzhen where they treated their staff absolutely poorly. I don't see any reason to believe them today. And as Zhao Dashuai said on that Twitter thread, it's an exploitative company. They go from place to place and use as cheaper labor as they can, which is obviously their modus operandi. And pretty soon, I'm not sure how long it will take, but as he said in that Twitter thread, Zhengzhou will probably be the last base for Foxconn in mainland China before they move on to cheaper labor somewhere else. So I think this whole situation comes down to absolutely poor management from Foxconn, absolutely terrible treatment of staff. And as I said before, the government, I can guarantee you, will be very upset with what's happening there and the image that's been put across by this uprising. Obviously, it's not a good look having police needing to turn up, riot police needing to turn up, because the Chinese government knows full well that Western media seize on these kind of images, try to portray China as some kind of a menacing, draconian society, when the same situation occurring in any other country would also require riot police to come and quiet the situation down. Now, as you've seen, for example, in Canada with the truckers, they were violently crushed. You saw some police came in on horses that were used against people and things like that. So honestly, I know two wrongs don't make a right, but what I'm saying is it's not easy to quell or bring peace when people are really angry. And their anger, the workers' anger at Foxconn, is from Foxconn management. And I'll say it again, Foxconn is a Taiwanese company. Yes, there is only one China, but Taiwan is currently administered by a separate government. You could call it a rogue government if you want. And don't forget that after reunification, there will also likely still be a separate government in Taiwan. So mentioning that Foxconn is a Taiwanese company is very relevant here and doesn't at all go against the one China policy. Keep that in mind, you guys. So basically, let's hope that Foxconn do the right thing, sort out the situation, treat their staff better. Obviously, I don't agree or believe in any way that that was a computer error. I think that's a cop-out. But hopefully we'll see some improvement of the situation there in Zhengzhou and those people can go back to work, earn the money they have been promised. Anyway, you guys, I would love to know what you guys think. As always, let me know what you think down below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.